I did not hear the knife at first. I felt it. A sharp pressure like my ribs cracked inward from the inside out, then a bloom of heat spreading beneath my skin. The second stab came before my brain could catch up the steel punching through flesh with a sick, wet sound that stole the air from my lungs. I could not scream. My breath came in short, broken gasps, each one weaker than the last. My cheek was pressed against the hardwood floor, cold and smooth, absorbing my blood as it pooled beneath me. My fingers twitched uselessly, slipping in the warmth collecting under my palm. Everything smelled like metal and lemon cleaner, bright and sharp, a scent that clung to the inside of my nose. The dim under-cabinet lights in the kitchen cast long shadows across the floorboards. In any other life, this would have been a peaceful evening. Dinner, warm lighting, a family home. But peace is easy to believe in until it turns on you. Until the people who promised family decide you are an inconvenience. My stepmother's voice drifted down to me calm and steady as though she were discussing the weather and not watching her stepson press a knife into my side. Your father left everything to us. Just stop breathing already. The words slid like ice into my veins. I tried to lift my head. My muscles shook. My vision swam. All I managed was a shallow whimper that died in my throat. Grant leaned over me, the floor creaking beneath his weight. His hand gripped my jaw, forcing my face into the wood. Warm breath hit my ear. No one will believe you. Not a soul. His voice was soft, almost gentle, and that softness terrified me more than the knife. Evil does not always shout. Sometimes it whispers and smiles like family. I tried to speak. My lips parted, but only a quiet sound escaped more like a breath than a word. Please. I hated how small I sounded, how fragile. My ribs screamed with each inhale. My body felt foreign, heavy, and light at once. I could feel myself slipping darkness tugging at the edges of my vision, inviting me to fall. I blinked hard. I had to stay awake, had to stay alive. Then, in the haze, something caught my eye beneath the sofa. A rectangle, a faint reflection. My phone. It must have fallen from my pocket when they grabbed me. It looked close, but the distance between us felt like a mile. My hand inched forward, shaking violently. My blood left a smear across the wood as I crawled my fingers toward salvation. I heard Lydia whisper urgently, "Hurry up! We need to finish this!" Grant shifted his weight. For one awful second, I thought he had noticed the phone. I froze, breath trapped in my throat, but his attention stayed on me, his grip tightening on the knife. I forced my hand onward, my fingertips brushed glass. I exhaled a painful breath, barely a sound, and dragged the phone toward me inch by inch. My ribs felt like they were grinding against each other. Every movement sent lightning shooting up my side. I swallowed a sob and slid my thumb across the screen. The recording screen lit up the red icon, glowing like a heartbeat. Record. My thumb tapped it. The device vibrated faintly in my hand. If I died tonight, the truth would not die with me. The knife plunged again this time, grazing bone. Not deep, but enough to send fire up my arm. My eyes rolled back. I tasted iron. My throat tightened as if invisible hands were squeezing it. Through the ringing in my ears, faint but unmistakable, came the hum of an approaching siren. I did not know if someone called 911 or if fate simply decided I deserved one more breath. The siren grew louder, red and blue light flashing in streaks across the wall through the window blinds. Grant cursed under his breath. Lydia hissed, "Keep her quiet." My breathing came in ragged bursts. The room tilted and blurred. Footsteps pounded outside. A radio crackled. Possible domestic stabbing. Female victim unconscious. The front door shook under heavy fists. "Police! Open the door!" Lydia gasped. Grant pulled away. Their footsteps retreated, scrambling, frantic. The knife clattered onto the counter. I tried to lift my head. My neck barely obeyed. Everything felt far away, underwater, muffled. The door burst open. Boots thundered inside. Voices commanded and echoed, layered with urgency. Female victim down. Heavy bleeding. "Stay with me, ma'am." A gloved hand pressed firmly on my side. A flashlight flashed across my face, blinding white, then fading to a soft blur. "Can you hear me? What is your name?" My lips trembled. Evelyn. The word barely existed. My name. My proof I was still here. "Hang on, Evelyn. We have you." A paramedic lifted my head gently, sliding something under me to stabilize me. Someone else held pressure on my wounds. My phone slipped from my hand, landing beside my arm, still recording, still glowing. Tears slid across my cheek, warm against the cold floor. Not from fear, from the faint, trembling spark of rage and defiance that refused to die in me. "I am alive." Those words throbbed inside me louder than the pain. I did not die on that kitchen floor, but the version of me who believed loyalty was protection did. When I woke again, I would not plead or hope for mercy. I would take it back. Everything they tried to steal. My voice, my home, my father's promise. They thought they killed my future. They only killed their last chance at forgiveness. My name is Evelyn Harper, and I turned 32 last spring. I used to think I understood loss. I thought losing my father was the sharpest pain life could carve into a person. For months after he passed, I would walk through our house with my fingertips brushing the walls, like I could still feel the warmth of his hand guiding me through each room. I told myself that grief would soften with time, that memories would hold me together, even as the world around me felt hollow. I was wrong. Grief did not prepare me for betrayal. Grief did not teach me how it feels when those who share your table also sharpen the knives. I thought death was an ending. It was not. The ending came later in a kitchen full of shadows and blood when the people who claimed to be family decided I did not deserve to breathe. But that night was not the beginning. The beginning was quiet, soft, almost tender. The kind of subtle undoing you only recognize in hindsight when every moment suddenly makes sense in a way that chills your bones. Before everything shattered, my life was painfully ordinary. I worked as a pharmacist in a small clinic where people came for advice about blood pressure medication or flu shots. I helped elderly patients sort pill bottles, and they would call me sweetheart and tell me I had kind eyes. I lived alone in a modest apartment, not because I wanted to leave the house my father built, but because after he died, stepping into that empty hallway felt like stepping into a grave. I thought distance would help me breathe. Instead, distance only made me long for what was stolen. Every weekend, I drove back to mow the lawn, wipe the dust from his framed photographs, and tend to the rose bushes he planted the year I graduated college. He used to say, "A home is your anchor, Ev. It holds you when the world tries to pull you apart." When I was younger, I thought he meant walls and a roof. Now I know he meant promises, roots, the memory of someone who believed you were worth loving. My stepmother Lydia moved into that house 3 years before my father passed. She smiled gently and brought baked pies to neighbors. People called her warm and graceful. I wanted to believe that. I wanted family. I wanted peace. And I mistook politeness for kindness. I mistook stillness in her eyes for patience instead of calculation. Grant, her son, moved in too. He was older than me by 2 years, tall and broad-shouldered, the kind of man who laughs loudly at his own jokes and likes to remind everyone that he lifts weights at sunrise. He acted like the house was his the moment he walked through the door. My father tried to bond us speaking about unity, second chances, new beginnings. He trusted too easily. He believed that love heals all. I believed him. I wanted to. Even after small comments started cutting beneath the surface. "You are sensitive, Evelyn. You overreact. You should be grateful you still have a home." Each sentence was a thread, and I let them tie themselves around me because I thought peace meant swallowing small hurts. I did not see how quickly small hurts become cages. After my father died, Lydia held a tissue to her lips and told me the will reading would happen soon. Soon became weeks. Weeks became excuses. She said lawyers were slow. She said paperwork was complicated. She said he left things unfinished. Grief fogged my mind. I did not question her. I did not want to. Questioning felt like betrayal. I did not know betrayal would be done to me long before I ever dared to push back. People always ask why victims stay silent until they bleed, why they do not run faster, shout louder, fight sooner. They do not understand that betrayal by family is not a lightning strike. It is erosion. Slow, gradual, invisible. By the time the storm hits, you are already ankle-deep in quicksand. I was not weak. I was loyal. I believed love could not coexist with danger. Now I know better. Now I know danger sometimes wraps itself in a familiar voice and calls itself family. That night on the kitchen floor, I thought I was losing everything. But the truth is simpler and crueler. I had been losing long before the knife ever touched me. I just did not recognize it. I do now. Before blood stained my father's floorboards and the sound of sirens replaced the sound of my breath, there was a time when the house glowed with warmth instead of dread. When I think of my childhood, I do not remember toys or vacations or birthday cakes. I remember wood and sunlight and the quiet steadiness of my father's presence. I remember the creak of the front porch at dusk, the smell of fresh-cut grass in spring, the heavy weight of a warm quilt he tucked around me on winter nights. Our home in Maple Hollow was not grand, but to me it was a kingdom. A white farmhouse with blue shutters, my father painted himself a wraparound porch where we sat in rocking chairs on humid July evenings, and a backyard filled with rose bushes that bloomed defiantly no matter how dry the season. He taught me how to turn soil with my own hands, how to place each seed with intention, how to water the earth like offering a prayer. Dirt under my fingernails never bothered me. It felt like inheritance. It felt like belonging. I was 12 when he handed me my first hammer and helped me nail a loose board back onto the fence. He did not just show me how. He let me try. He steadied my elbow when I wobbled and said gently, "Houses are like people. You take care of the small things or the big ones fall apart." I did not realize then that he was also talking about hearts. He believed in me in a way that made me stand taller, like his confidence poured into my spine and held me upright. He used to say, "Ev, every good thing takes work. That includes you." Every memory of him rings with patience and pride, not perfection, but love so deeply rooted it felt immovable. He never raised his voice at me, never made me feel small. He taught me how to check oil in the truck, how to unclog a sink, how to sand a splintered banister without rushing. He never treated me like a burden, only like a partner in a life we were building together. On Sundays, we would drink lemonade on the porch, and he would tell me stories about my mother. He never let grief turn bitter, never let loss become poison. I thought that was strength. Now I know it was devotion. The day he introduced Lydia into our world, I tried to welcome her the way he asked me to. She stood on the porch in a soft cream sweater and pearl earrings, smiling like she already belonged, like she had been rehearsing the role of caretaker for years. Her hands were perfectly manicured, not a trace of soil beneath her nails. She told me she was happy to meet me, but there was a flicker in her eyes that never quite reached warmth, like she was studying me rather than seeing me. She brought pies to neighbors and praised the house with sugary admiration, but she never asked about the roses. Never asked about the story behind each photograph on the wall. She moved through the house like someone touring a museum, careful not to touch anything that might smudge her illusion of grace. Grant arrived shortly after. Tall, broad-shouldered, the kind of man who walked like the world owed him space. He flicked his hair back and smirked when he shook my hand. "Nice house," he said, scanning the hallway pictures like he was choosing which walls to repaint. The words, "nice house," did not sound like admiration. They sounded like a claim. My father did not see it. Or maybe he chose not to. He wanted a family again, and loneliness makes even the wisest hearts hopeful. I remember the first day Lydia trimmed the roses without asking. She cut them short, butchered their shape as if beauty offended her unless she could control it. My father did not notice the look on my face, but she did. And she smiled small and victorious like she had won something invisible. That was the first time I felt something shift beneath the floorboards of our life, a faint tremor I could not name. It was not enough to make me afraid. Not yet. But like a single crack in a foundation, it widened slowly over time. Not all storms arrive with thunder. Some begin with silence. I was 17 when my father asked me to promise I would always protect the house no matter what. It was an odd request at the time, solemn and heavy for a quiet summer evening. We were fixing a loose shutter, the sun sinking orange behind the trees. He paused, hand still on the screwdriver, eyes shining with something I did not understand then. This home is yours too, Ev. Someday you will need to stand firm. Promise me. I promised without knowing I had just sworn myself into a war I never wanted. A war fought not with weapons first, but with words and deception and the slow, suffocating erosion of trust. I did not lose my home in one violent night. I lost it piece by piece in smiles that hid teeth in politeness, sharpened into power, in the delicate way Lydia closed doors behind her as though sealing secrets inside. I did not realize a storm was coming. I thought grief had already taken everything it could, but storms do not always roar when they form. Sometimes they stand quietly at the edge of the yard, waiting for the right moment to strike. When my father died, the world did not break with thunder or drama. It ended quietly in a hospice room with soft humming machines and the faint scent of antiseptic clinging to the air. His breathing slowed like a tired engine, each exhale thinner than the last, and I held his hand while whispering that it was okay to rest. He squeezed my fingers one final time, and then he was still. Silence settled over the room like snow, heavy and cold, muffling everything. I remember staring at his face and realizing there would be no more Sunday porch stories, no more shared tools, no more laughter bouncing off the kitchen walls. I thought grief had found its peak that night. I did not know it was only the beginning. The funeral was small, modest the way he wanted. Neighbors brought casseroles and condolences. A pastor who barely knew him spoke soft words about kindness and legacy, and I stood there numb, clutching a rose so tightly the thorns bit into my palm. Lydia cried with a trembling handkerchief pressed to her cheek. Grant stood beside her in a perfectly tailored suit, jaw-tight eyes scanning the crowd instead of the casket. They looked like a family in mourning, but I felt alone beside them like an outsider who wandered into someone else's tragedy. After the burial, people hugged me and called me brave. Then they went back to their lives as they always do. Loss is shared in public, but suffered in private. I returned to the house that night expecting quiet. Instead, I walked into a battlefield disguised as a living room. Lydia sat at the dining table with stacks of folders spread before her, hands folded with an air of authority. Grant leaned against the fireplace mantel like a ruler surveying his estate. They did not offer condolences. They did not ask if I was all right. Lydia looked at me with tight eyes and said, "We will handle the estate. Your father trusted us." The way she said father, not your husband or our husband, stung. It separated us in a single breath. I sat down still in my funeral dress and asked about the will. Lydia smiled, but her lips barely moved. "The lawyers need time. We will meet soon. Everything is under control." The words felt rehearsed, too smooth, too prepared. She slid a binder shut like sealing a tomb. I nodded because grief fogs judgment, and I trusted the woman my father trusted. That was my first mistake. Days turned into weeks. I called the lawyer repeatedly. He was always unavailable, always busy, always promising to call me back. He never did. Meanwhile, the house changed in subtle ways. Furniture moved. Framed photos of my father and me disappeared from the hallway and were replaced with ones of Lydia and Grant smiling at charity events. My childhood painting from 3rd grade, once proudly pinned by the fridge, vanished. The rose vase I gave my father for his birthday sat empty, dusty. Each absence was small enough to ignore if you tried hard. And I tried, because sometimes the heart clings to hope even when truth is clawing at the door. Lydia began making decisions without speaking to me. She hired landscapers to replace my father's roses with neat white hydrangeas and dismissed it as refreshing the yard. She donated his favorite armchair to a charity drop-off. Grant took over the garage and tossed out my father's old tools like junk. None of it was discussed. It was simply done. When I confronted Lydia gently, she patted my hand and said, "You are emotional, dear. Let us take care of things. Grief can make you impulsive. It was not advice. It was dismissal dressed as concern." Grant chimed in with a smirk. "You should focus on healing. Leave the grown-up decisions to us." That was when something inside me shifted. It did not explode. It tightened like a knot pulling closed around my ribs. My father raised me to speak to stand, but respect for him muted me. I kept thinking he loved them. He chose them. Maybe they mean well, but love can make fools of even the most grounded souls. I waited. I observed. And every day I sank a little deeper into doubt, unsure whether I was mourning a father or the life that went with him. One afternoon, I overheard Lydia on the phone in the hallway. She whispered sharply, "Yes, once we finish the paperwork, the property is secure. No, she will not interfere. She is fragile." My stomach twisted. She spoke like I was already removed, erased. I stepped forward and she ended the call quickly, offering a thin smile. "Just business things. You would not understand." There it was again. That phrase, "you would not understand," it became her favorite weapon. Soft enough to seem harmless, sharp enough to slice. I started keeping my distance, staying at my apartment more often, returning only to water the roses and breathe in the air that still felt like my father. But every visit the house felt less like mine and more like theirs. And every time I told myself to trust them a little longer, to wait for the will reading to believe fairness would naturally arrive. That was my second mistake. Silence is what predators eat first. It was 2 months after the funeral when Lydia finally announced a family dinner to discuss the inheritance. Her tone was gentle, but her eyes were triumphant. Something deep in my chest clenched instinct whispering a warning I still did not fully grasp. I told myself it was just grief anxiety. I did not yet know I was stepping into the moment where love loses and survival begins. We would sit at that dinner table and they would show their teeth. The night Lydia called it a family dinner, I told myself to breathe, to stay calm, to be polite. It was what my father would have wanted, I thought. Grace in the face of grief. Dignity through hardship. I dressed carefully that evening, choosing a soft blue sweater my father always said made my eyes look like the sky before rain. I practiced steady breathing on the drive over, gripping the wheel with trembling fingers. The house looked the same from the outside, white siding glowing under the porch light, wind chimes swaying gently in the evening breeze. But as soon as I stepped through the door, something felt wrong. Too quiet. Too cold. It was the kind of silence you hear in waiting rooms before bad news or in courtrooms before verdicts. Lydia greeted me with a crisp smile, cheeks powdered, hair perfectly curled. She kissed my cheek as if she had ever cared to be maternal. "Evelyn, darling, so glad you came." Her tone felt like a script, her touch colder than the front door handle. Grant stood behind her, leaning against the island like he owned more than the granite beneath his palms. He wore a blazer despite being inside their own home, as if dressing the part made him worthy of the role he was auditioning for, Lord of the Manor. "Dinner is ready," Lydia said, gesturing toward the dining room. Her movements were precise, rehearsed, like she had practiced them in front of a mirror. The table was set with my father's china. My throat tightened. He only used that set for holidays, or for me when something good happened like my college graduation or my first job. Seeing it laid out now felt like sacrilege. I took my seat slowly, waiting for comfort that never came. There were only 3 place settings. My heart stuttered at that. In all the years my father lived, he always left a 4th setting out for my mother even after she passed. He said, "Love does not vanish when breath does." Lydia's eyes followed my gaze and she smiled sweetly. "We thought it was time to move forward," she said. "No need to dwell in the past." Grant poured wine with exaggerated care, filling his glass nearly to the brim, mine halfway. "Toast to new beginnings," he said. His grin did not reach his eyes. We started eating, or pretending to. The air tasted thick. The food might as well have been cardboard. I held my fork like a defense weapon instead of a utensil. Lydia dabbed her mouth delicately with a napkin, then placed it down as if signaling the start of something heavy. "So, Evelyn, it is time we discuss the future." Grant slid a folder across the table, nudging it toward me with 2 fingers, not unlike someone pushing unwanted mail. A faint chill ran down my spine. I looked at the folder but did not touch it. "What is this?" Grant leaned back smugly and folded his arms. "Just paperwork to finalize the estate. Make everything clean and simple." Lydia nodded gently. "It is for the best. Your father wanted peace." I opened the folder with fingers that felt too light and too heavy all at once. Inside were documents transferring the deed of the house and land to Lydia and Grant exclusively. My name was absent as if I had never existed. My heartbeat roared in my ears. My father would never. Lydia tilted her head, pity painted across her face like cheap makeup. Grief clouds judgment, dear. He trusted us to manage things. It is too big a responsibility for you alone. Grant leaned forward. Sign now. Let us take care of it. His voice was a command disguised as reason. Something hot and fierce ignited in my chest, cutting through the fog of shock. I forced my gaze to meet theirs. I am not signing anything without the will. Lydia's smile tightened lips thinning like pressed wire. Sweetheart, this is simpler. The will is complicated. Legal processes are large and stressful. Let us handle it. No. The word was quiet but solid. Grant's jaw twitched. His voice dropped to a low hum like thunder before a storm. Do not make this difficult. It is already decided. My stomach clenched. Until that moment, I had clung to a fragile belief that they were misguided, not malicious. But now the mask slipped, and I saw the truth, entitlement sharp as teeth, greed dripping like venom. My hand shook under the table, but I slowly reached into my purse, pretending to search for something. I opened the Notes app on my phone and tapped record without looking down. Stealing my voice, I whispered, "My father wanted me to have this house." Grant's mouth curled in disgust. Your father was too sentimental. This house needs leadership. You do not have what it takes. Lydia raised her wine glass. We are offering you peace. Do not choose conflict. My pulse hammered in my throat. And what if I do not sign? The air in the room stilled heavy enough to suffocate. Grant leaned in, voice dropping into something darker, smoother. Then things will get unpleasant. Lydia's fingers tapped the table once sharp and precise. Do not make us be the bad ones. It was not a threat. It was the unveiling of a plan. I straightened my back. Maybe for the first time since losing my father, I remembered the steel he put in me. No, I will not sign. Silence followed, a silence that was not empty but loaded, like the held breath before an explosion. Lydia picked up her napkin, folded it perfectly, placed it on her plate. Her voice was icy. If you walk out that door without signing, you will regret it. My chair scraped back as I stood. Maybe, but I will not betray him. I walked out without looking back, the recording still running in my pocket. As the front door clicked shut behind me, the night air felt colder than winter. I had no idea then that this was only their first attempt. They would not stop at intimidation. They would trade politeness for venom, words for violence, a pen for a blade. 3 days passed in a silence so heavy it felt like walking through thick fog. I went to work, filled prescriptions, smiled at elderly patients, said gentle things like, "Take this with food and call us if you feel dizzy." On the outside, I was Evelyn Harper, calm and capable. Inside, I was a trembling wire pulled too tight, waiting for a snap. Every night after my shift, I drove past the house. I could not help myself. The porch light glowed softly like it always did when my father lived, as if it were still trying to guide me home. But that house was not a refuge anymore. It was a battlefield occupied by enemies who shared my dinner table and my last name only through marriage and legal convenience. I told myself they would cool off, that threats and anger meant nothing, that people did not destroy family over property. Deep down, I knew better, but hope clings stubbornly when fear is still learning how to speak. On the 4th night, a knock shattered the quiet. It was gentle, almost polite, but dread rolled through my stomach like thunder. No one knocks gently at night unless they want something terrible and want it to look civilized. I hesitated before opening the door. Grant stood there, shoulders squared like he expected welcome instead of suspicion. Lydia hovered slightly behind him, her face arranged into soft sympathy like a mask stitched too tight. "Evelyn," Lydia said sweetly. Her voice, honey-dipped poison, "We thought we should talk." Grant held a folder in his hand again. Not the same folder from dinner, thicker. He smiled, but no warmth touched his eyes. "We realized we came off harsh. We want to fix this before lawyers complicate things." A chill traced my spine. They were not here to apologize. Predators do not knock to say sorry. They knock to finish what they started. I kept the door half closed, my body a barrier small but resolute. "I think we already discussed everything." Grant chuckled softly, shaking his head like I was a child refusing vegetables instead of my birthright. "Evelyn, this is your chance to make things easy." Lydia clasped her hands, her voice trembling in false concern. "We do not want this to get ugly." Ugly! The word slithered under my skin. It was not a warning. It was a promise. I felt something inside me gather itself slowly like a storm, pulling energy from every uneasy breath I had swallowed the past months. I said, "If you have something to say it here. I am not going anywhere with you." Grant's nostrils flared. For a brief second, the veneer cracked, then it smoothed over. "Fine." He lifted the folder. "Sign these and this ends quietly. You still get—" He paused as if the number tasted bad in his mouth, a small payout. My heart thudded. They were no longer pretending I was part of the home, part of the legacy, part of the family. Lydia sighed softly as if I were an inconvenience, a smudge on her perfect life. "You know your father was sentimental. He wanted to protect you, but you are not built for managing an estate. You cannot expect to hold on to something you cannot handle." Translation: "You do not deserve this. You are weak. You are alone." I pushed the door a fraction more closed. "No," I said simply. Lydia blinked. Grant's jaw clenched. He leaned close, voice lowering enough that only I could hear. "Do not be stupid. We will not ask again." Something about the way he said, "We will not ask again," made my skin prickle. It was not a threat of lawyers or paperwork. It was a threat of force, finality. I swallowed hard. "You should leave. Now." Lydia gave me a long, cool look as if cataloging every flaw she thought she could use against me. Grant stared at me like a puzzle he intended to break rather than solve. Then he smiled once more, a thin, dangerous curve. "See you soon, Ev." The nickname curdled in my stomach. My father used to call me Ev with warmth. Grant used it like a weapon. They turned and walked away, slowly, unhurried, confident. Because they believed time was on their side. They believed fear would do their bidding. And for a moment after the door shut, I felt a tremor of doubt. Am I strong enough for this? What if I am overreacting? What if they are right? But then I pictured my father's hands guiding mine as we built the fence together, the warmth in his voice when he said, "Someday you will need to stand firm." "Promise me." I whispered into the quiet. I promised. I picked up my phone and replayed the recording from the dinner again, listening to the venom behind their polite words. Each second steadied me. Truth has weight when you hold it tight enough. As I closed the recording, my screen lit with a text from an unknown number. It read only one sentence. "You should have signed." My breath froze. The walls around me felt like they were listening, holding secrets I had not meant to live inside. I did not reply. I did not sleep. I sat in my living room until dawn painted pale light across the walls, every minute a reminder that danger does not always knock loudly. Sometimes it waits. Sometimes it watches. Sometimes it returns with a knife instead of a folder. The night they came for me did not feel like a storm. It felt like still water, too quiet, too calm, the kind of silence that settles right before something breaks. I had just finished my shift and my feet ached, but I did not drive past the house this time. I was trying to teach myself distance, trying to create space between myself and the war they were preparing. I made tea chamomile the way my father used to when sleep felt far away. I curled up on the couch with a blanket around my shoulders, phone beside me, trying to convince myself that the worst had already happened, that threats were their final act. People threaten, they vent, they bluster. They do not follow through. That was the lie I fed myself until the clock struck 10:30 and someone knocked on my door. Not a gentle knock this time. A hard, deliberate one, the kind that vibrates down your spine. I froze tea halfway to my lips. Another knock. I called out, "Who is it?" Silence. A third knock, louder, shaking the frame. My pulse hammered. I reached for my phone thumb hovering above the emergency call button. Then a voice slid through the wood like a blade sliding through silk. "Evelyn," it was Lydia. Calm, steady, sweet enough to rot teeth. "We need to talk." My knees weakened. No, no talking. No pretending. No illusions. Not anymore. "Go away," I called back, voice breaking slightly. "We have nothing to discuss." Footsteps scraped softly outside like someone shifting their stance. Then Grant spoke deeper-edged with cold finality. "Open the door." My breath hitched. I stared at the lock. The lock I suddenly wasn't sure could protect me. I did the thing fear never wants you to do. I said no. A long silence followed. Then the doorknob rattled. Slowly. Testing. Measuring. A pause. Then a soft click of metal. A sound I recognized too late. Lockpicks. I stumbled backward. Panic surged hot and electric through my body. My fingers fumbled for my phone, tapping the record button as a reflex my trauma had trained into me. The lock clicked again. Then the door swung open. They stepped inside like they owned the air in my lungs. Lydia in her cream coat hair, perfectly styled lips pressed into a thin line of false concern. Grant behind her face, hard jaw, clenched eyes burning with the certainty of someone who believed consequences were for other people. I held my phone tight. "Leave. Now." Lydia shut the door gently behind her like we were closing out a draft instead of a nightmare. Her voice softened, dripping syrup and venom. "You forced our hand, dear." Grant moved toward me. I backed up, heart punching my ribs. "You had your chance to sign." He rolled his shoulders, muscles tightening beneath his jacket like he was preparing for a workout instead of a crime. Lydia nodded, once methodical, a judge handing down a sentence. "You chose conflict, so now conflict comes to you." I bolted toward the kitchen, not because I had a plan, but because survival is instinct before it is strategy. They followed, heavy footsteps, controlled, confident. I grabbed the counter for balance, my breath ragged. "Get out!" My voice cracked but held. Lydia's face hardened. "You are more trouble than you are worth." Grant's hand slammed into my back, shoving me forward. My hip collided with the edge of the counter, pain flaring white. I gasped. My phone slid across the island, clattering onto the floor, still recording. "Do not make this worse, Evelyn," Lydia hissed, stepping forward. I reached for a drawer, blindly expecting utensils, grabbing metal instinctively. But Grant was faster. His hand clamped around my wrist, twisting hard. The pain radiated like lightning. "Do not fight," he growled. I jerked away, frantic strength kicking in. His other hand shoved me back, and I stumbled, spine hitting the fridge. The world shook. My pulse roared. Lydia stood behind him, expression flat detached. Not rage, not panic, just cold efficiency. This had been planned. I saw it in her eyes. They did not come here to threaten. They came to finish. Grant lunged. My scream caught in my throat. His arm swung, and I felt steel-kissed skin. A slice. Sharp. Hot. Real. My breath stuttered. The knife flashed again, catching the dim kitchen light. No thought remained. Just survival. I ducked, grabbed at his hand nails, digging body thrashing like a trapped animal. He shoved me again harder, sending me crashing against the cabinet. Air fled my lungs. Lydia's voice floated eerily calm. "Get it over with." Those 4 words cracked something open inside me, a place beyond fear where instinct burns pure and desperate. I clawed at the floor, reaching blindly under the table until my fingers brushed fabric. The couch skirt, my phone. I dragged myself toward it, ribs screaming. Grant grabbed my ankle, yanking me back. My nails scraped wood. I kicked wildly, foot connecting with his shin. He cursed and swung again. The blade plunged into my side. The world exploded white. A sound left my mouth, not a scream. but something raw and broken, a wounded animal sound I did not recognize as human, my own. Heat soaked into my shirt, my skin burned, my breath hitching too shallow too fast. Dying, my brain whispered. Lydia's heels clicked closer. She knelt beside me, her perfume chokingly sweet fingers patting my cheek like comforting a child. "This did not have to happen," she murmured. "You brought this on yourself." Her voice held no hatred, just inconvenience, as if my survival was an obstacle, not a life. I forced my arm forward again, every nerve-screaming hand trembling like it belonged to a dying stranger. My fingertips grazed my phone. "Please," I whispered not to them, but to the universe. My hand closed around it. I hit record again, even though it was already running, thumb slipping across blood. Grant noticed too late. He lunged, but I rolled weakly body, collapsing toward the floor. Pain detonated in my rib cage. The knife clattered somewhere near the dishwasher. I heard Grant breathing hard above me, heard Lydia mutter, "Damn it, low and vicious." Then a distant siren cut through the night air. Louder, closer, growing like a promise. Red and blue flashed faint through blinds. Lydia's voice tightened. "We need to leave. Now." Grant hesitated, chest-heaving rage trembling under his skin. But footsteps and radio static were approaching. He spit a curse at me like venom. "You should have just signed." They fled. The door slammed. Silence swallowed the room, broken only by my ragged gasps and the faint hum of the refrigerator. My vision blurred. I felt my blood pooling warm beneath me. My phone buzzed weakly, still recording my breath, my pain, my survival. I pressed my cheek to the cold floor and whispered the last words before darkness pulled me under. "Dad, I kept my promise." The sirens stopped outside. Boots thundered up my steps. A voice shouted, "Police." My eyes closed. I woke to light. Not warm sunlight through lace curtains, not the soft gold that filled my father's porch at dawn. This light was sterile and sharp, drilling through my eyelids like needles. My body felt heavy, pinned down by invisible hands. When I tried to breathe, pain flared along my ribs, hot and brutal, like knives twisting with every inhale. A voice filtered through the haze, gentle but steady. "Evelyn, can you hear me?" I tried to turn my head, but it felt filled with sand. A groan escaped instead, low and raw. Air hissed through oxygen tubes touching my cheeks. Machines beeped rhythmically, a metronome of survival. Then a hand touched mine, gloved but warm beneath the latex. "You're safe. You're at St. Helena Memorial." My eyelids fought gravity till finally they lifted. A nurse stood beside my bed. Brown eyes soft and full of concern, hair pulled into a loose bun. Her badge read, Emma RRN. Her voice was the kind strangers use when they want to keep you tethered to the world. "You made it through surgery." "You're very lucky." Her words floated over me slow to sink in. Made it. Surgery. Lucky. My throat felt like gravel. I tried to speak, but only a croak came out. Emma leaned closer. "Just rest for a moment." I blinked. The room swam into focus, white walls, faint antiseptic smell, IV lines threading into my arm. EKG wires tracing my heartbeat in jagged lines across a monitor. Hospital. Alive. The memories hit like a tidal wave. The door unlocking. Lydia's cold eyes. Grant's weight crashing into me. Steel tearing flesh. My hand reaching for my phone. Sirens. Pain. Darkness. My chest shook. I gasped. Panic surged, a wild animal waking inside my ribs. My breath went shallow and fast, each inhale slicing. Emma put a hand on my shoulder firmly but kindly. "It's okay. You're safe. You're in the ER. They can't reach you here." Her certainty pressed into my spinning thoughts like an anchor. Can't reach me. Safe. I clung to those words the way a drowning person clings to the surface. A doctor entered, glasses perched low on his nose, expression calm but intense. "Dr. Patel, trauma surgery." He glanced at my chart and then at me. You suffered multiple stab wounds and significant blood loss. 2 ribs fractured. We repaired internal bleeding near your liver. You're stable now." His voice softened, losing its clinical edge. This was no accident, was it? The question opened something inside me, a wound deeper than the ones stitched on my skin. I stared at him, throat burning. My lips parted, words crawled out shaking. "My family! They tried to kill me!" My voice cracked. Saying it aloud made it real in a way the blood on the kitchen floor couldn't. Dr. Patel's expression changed, not shock, but resolve. "I suspected as much," he said quietly. "And you need to know something important. The police are here. They want to talk to you when you're ready." Fear flashed sharp and instinctual. I whispered, Are Grant and Lydia here?" Emma squeezed my hand. "No, they don't know you're awake. You're under protective status. Security is posted outside your door." Relief washed over me, but it was tangled with terror so deep it trembled in my bones. I wasn't safe because I was healed. I was safe because someone was blocking the door. That truth settled heavy on my chest. Dr. Patel lowered his voice. "The officers have questions, but we won't let them in until you can handle it. Rest first." He stepped back. But before he left, he paused. His eyes met mine with quiet steel. "I want you to know something. Victims survive because they fight. And you fought. You saved yourself." When they left, I lay there staring at the ceiling tiles, each square blurring, then snapping into focus. I should have felt relief, gratitude, anything resembling peace. Instead, I felt hollow. Shock numbs strangely. It freezes you while fire still burns underneath. A memory sparked my father showing me how to brace a fence post in the ground, his hand over mine. "Stand firm, Ev. Do not let anyone move what you know is yours." Tears slid down the sides of my face, disappearing into the pillow. I whispered into the empty air, "Dad, I tried." The door opened again, but this time the footsteps were measured official. A police officer stepped in uniform, stiff body language, careful like approaching a fragile bridge. "Officer Ramirez," he said gently. I nodded weakly. He didn't sit. He knelt beside the bed so we were eye level. That small gesture broke me a little. "We responded to a 911 call from your neighbors," he said. "They heard screaming. Found you unresponsive. You were lucky they checked." My breath trembled. My neighbors. People I barely waved to. They saved my life without knowing my name. His voice lowered. "We found signs of forced entry. No one else was in the house. And here..." He paused, eyes searching mine. "We found your phone. It was still recording." My pulse throbbed in my ears. The recording. Proof. My lifeline. Officer Ramirez softened his tone. "Evelyn, you got their voices. You got everything." A sob broke free from my chest before I could stop it. Not fear, not pain. Something else. Vindication. Witness. Survival. My voice shook. "I am not crazy. I am not imagining this." He shook his head firmly. "No. You are a victim of a crime, and we will protect you, not just as a case, as a person." I nodded, eyes stinging. My ribs throbbed, but for the first time since my father died, I felt something steady under my feet. Not safety, but the beginning of it. Emma returned, adjusting my IV gently. "Rest, sweetie. You're not alone anymore." That sentence landed like a shock, because for so long, loneliness had been my silent companion. Now law enforcement stood outside my door. Nurses stood guard with compassion sharper than any blade, and I had proof, cold, undeniable, digital truth. I closed my eyes, breathing shallow but steady. I wasn't just alive. I was dangerous to them. The day after I woke up, the hospital room shifted from a place of survival to a command center. Not loud or chaotic, but steady and deliberate like the quiet hours before dawn, soldiers brace for battle. My pain dulled under medication, but clarity sharpened in its place, and with it came purpose. I was no longer clinging to life. I was building a case. I was reclaiming everything they tried to carve out of me. Emma entered first that morning, her steps soft but full of momentum. She checked my vitals, smoothed my blanket, tucked a curl of hair behind my ear like a sister might. "You look stronger today," she said. I nodded, swallowing past the raw ache in my throat. I needed strength more than comfort now. A knock sounded and Officer Ramirez stepped in, not alone this time. With him stood Detective Harper. No relation, he clarified immediately, though I could feel his last name echoing through me like an omen anyway. He was tall, mid-50s, graying hair, eyes sharp enough to cut through lies before they formed. He introduced himself with a small, respectful nod, then set his notebook on the bedside tray. "Evelyn, we are here to document everything he said, but this is your pace, your voice. We follow you." No one had ever said those words to me. "We follow you." It steadied something deep inside me. Ramirez tapped a sealed evidence bag on the counter. "Your phone is being processed." "The recording is secure." Grant's voice. Lydia's orders, the threats, the forced entry. It's all there. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the truth settle like heat spreading through cold limbs. The evidence existed outside of me now. Pain can be dismissed. Women can be doubted. Victims can be questioned. But audio, their own voices, there is no rewriting that. When I opened my eyes again, Detective Harper leaned forward. "I need you to walk us through everything from the moment the estate conversations began. No rush. Just truth." I inhaled shallowly, ribs aching, but strength grew with each breath. I told them. Every comment, every subtle jab, every delay tactic with the will. The dinner where they placed the papers in front of me like a guillotine disguised as inheritance. The threats at my door. The text that chilled the air in my apartment. They listened without interruption. No raised brows. No patronizing disbelief. No questioning my sanity. They took notes like every piece mattered, because it did. When I finished, my voice cracked, but did not break. Detective Harper set his pen down gently. "This is coercion, estate manipulation, and attempted murder. This is a pattern, not a moment." Ramirez nodded. "And you documented it. You didn't know, but you built a trail." I blinked at the ceiling tears burning. My father used to say I was meticulous, too careful sometimes. I used to think it made me anxious. Now I realized it made me survive. A soft knock came again. This time it was Marissa, my best friend, the one person who knew grief carved into my bones. She rushed to the bedside, eyes wide and red. "Evelyn. Oh my God." I reached for her hand, feeling warmth that no hospital machine could replicate. She didn't ask what happened. She already knew enough to let silence hold space for shock. Instead, she brushed tears off my cheek with her thumb and exhaled shakily. "You're here. That's all I need." Detective Harper stepped aside respectfully. "Ma'am, if you're someone she trusts, you should stay." She squeezed my shoulder, firm and protective. "I'm not going anywhere." Officer Ramirez cleared his throat gently. "Evelyn, we want to secure protective custody orders today. We will have patrol on your home and hospital room, and we recommend you stay somewhere secure after discharge." I nodded, then whispered, "They wanted my father's house. They wanted everything he built." Harper's voice lowered. "And now we make sure they lose everything instead." Those words steadied my breathing more than oxygen lines. The detectives left to process the paperwork, and Marissa sat beside me. She adjusted her chair, crossed her legs like she was settling in for war. "I brought my laptop," she said, "and a notebook, and snacks. Healthy ones, doctor approved." Despite everything, a tired laugh broke from my chest. She always came prepared. When the room quieted, she leaned close. "Tell me what you remember." Everything. Not the police version, the real one. And I did. The tremor in Lydia's hands disguised as grace. The controlled arrogance in Grant's voice every time he said father, like he rehearsed it to replace my blood in the family tree. The first time the roses disappeared. The way grief softened me like clay and they shaped my vulnerability into their weapon. Marissa listened, jaw set, frustration brewing like a storm. When I finished, she reached into her bag and pulled out a folder thick with pages. "I printed every email you ever forwarded me," she said. "Every message, every voicemail you texted about. You didn't delete them. You archived them." She smiled proud and fierce. "I know you. You're careful, even when you think you're not." I felt something warm bloom in my chest, not relief, not victory, belonging. Marisa opened her laptop. "Okay, first things first. House title records, probate filings, bank access logs. We're going to pull everything while the police work from their side." My eyes widened. "Marisa, you don't have to." She cut me off with a look that could silence thunder. "They tried to take your life, not just your house. I am here and I am not leaving you alone in this." I swallowed hard. Gratitude mixed with grief until my throat hurt. She clicked open a public property database, typed in my father's full name, scanned, frowned. "There, look at this." The estate had been listed as pending transfer. 2 months after my father died, without my signature, without my knowledge. They were already trying to erase me on paper long before they tried with a blade. Marissa's hand tightened around mine. "They underestimated you. That was their biggest mistake." My eyes burned, but I didn't cry. Not now. Not with strength gathering like armor over bruises. Another knock came. A nurse wheeled in a clear plastic bag. "Your personal belongings, clothes cut open, shoes stained, and there inside a smaller pouch my phone. Back from evidence, cleaned, released for me." I held it in trembling fingers. This little device, witness, shield, weapon, lifeline. In its cracked screen, I saw myself reflected, hurt, bruised, stitched, but alive. Dangerous. Waking. I whispered like an oath only I needed to hear. They wanted to silence me. They made me louder. Marisa nodded. "And when you're ready, we're going to burn them down with nothing but truth." The nurse checked my vitals again, whispering gently, "You're stronger than you think." When she left the room, settled into quiet again. But it was not the silence of fear anymore. It was the silence before strategy, before justice, before reckoning. Outside, footsteps echoed police voices, low patience, murmuring machines, humming. Life continued, but mine had pivoted into something sharper. I stared at the ceiling ribs, aching, heart steadying. I was no longer bleeding on a kitchen floor. I was rebuilding, and this time I wasn't alone. I would gather evidence like bricks. I would build my case like a fortress. I would not just survive. I would reclaim. The hospital smelled like bleach and quiet determination the morning my life shifted from survival to strategy. Nurses moved like steady clock hands, purposeful and calm, and outside my door, 2 uniformed officers stood as if they were walls themselves. I could feel the world outside sharpening, focusing on me. I was no longer prey bleeding in a kitchen. I was a witness, a living affidavit, a storm gathering strength. Detective Harper returned mid-morning, file in hand, his expression carved with purpose. Behind him walked a woman in a navy suit, heels clicking like punctuation. Her presence filled the room before she spoke. "I am attorney Rachel Monroe," she said. "Victims' rights and estate litigation. The district attorney recommended you call me, but the detectives moved first." "Good. That told me something important. I had people fighting behind me before I had breath to fight for myself." Rachel pulled a chair close to the bed, notepad ready, posture crisp. She did not soften her voice the way doctors did. She did not coddle or coo. She spoke to me like someone who would soon hold my life's dignity in a courtroom. "Evelyn, she began what happened to you is attempted murder, aggravated assault and conspiracy. On top of that, they tried to illegally transfer property. That is felony estate fraud." I swallowed, throat rough. Her tone stayed even. "We are not going to wait for them to lawyer up and spin this. We hit first. We hit fast." I felt the faintest tremor in my ribs from breathing too hard, but I nodded anyway. Detective Harper opened his file, flipping pages that already told my story in sterile ink, crime scene photos, medical reports, phone records, the transcript of my recording typed and time-stamped. He slid a sheet forward. "You were smart to record. It will be the backbone of everything." Hearing that felt like someone had placed a steel rod in my spine. Not luck, not accident. Smart, prepared. Rachel leaned in. First protective order, already in motion. You will not be within 100 yards of them, and if they try to contact you, they go straight to jail. My pulse steadied. Second criminal charges, attempted homicide, breaking and entering, assault with a deadly weapon, conspiracy. She listed each one like nails being driven into wood, building something unshakable. Third estate injunction. They will not touch that house. They will not move a penny. They will not so much as breathe in the direction of a bank account without legal consequence. It hit me then what my father always gave me without saying permission to fight. Rachel raised an eyebrow, studying my face. Evelyn, I need to know right now. Do you intend to pursue this fully? No backing down. No stopping halfway. This will get loud. You will be seen. There will be whispers. Family cases always draw curiosity. Are you prepared? I thought of blood on tile, of Lydia's voice telling me I brought this on myself. I thought of Grant's breath on my skin as he pushed the knife in. Prepared, I whispered. Rachel nodded once, brisk and satisfied. Good, because we are going to go after them with everything. The door opened again and another figure entered. A second detective, older, broader, wearing the weight of years in law enforcement like a second coat. Detective Owens Harper introduced. Financial Crimes Division. He sat down like a man who didn't waste time. We pulled preliminary bank activity. Your father's account started draining before he passed. My chest tightened painfully. Rachel leaned forward. When? Owens flipped his file open. 6 weeks before death. Large withdrawals. Transfers to an account under a business name Lydia is connected to. Another under Grant's. My heartbeat went stiff and still. She started stealing before he was gone. Owens didn't soften the truth. Predators do not wait for the funeral. Rachel's voice sharpened. We will seize those accounts, we will subpoena documents, and we will trace every dollar. Harper added, we will also press the DA for a grand jury. They are not slipping through this. For the first time since the kitchen floor, I inhaled without feeling like the world was pressing a blade against my ribs. Marissa, who had returned and sat quietly in the corner, leaned forward. So, what do we do first? Rachel smiled, not warm, but fierce. First, Evelyn files a statement. Then we file 3 emergency petitions. Then we send the officers to pick them up. It will be visible. It will be public. They will feel every eye in town on them. A tear threatened to spill, not from fear, but from the raw shock of realizing I was not alone in this fight. I clenched my jaw, holding the emotion in like a shield. I want to do it, I whispered. All of it. Owens placed a small voice recorder on the tray table. Ready when you are. I took a slow breath. My voice was quiet but steady when I started. My name is Evelyn Harper, and my stepmother and stepbrother tried to kill me to steal my father's home. The room felt still. The words hung like truth forged in steel. I spoke for nearly an hour. Everything spilled out, dates, conversations, threats, the first moment Lydia trimmed the roses without asking, the slow suffocation of control, disguised as grief support. When I finished, the silence felt like relief instead of dread. Detective Harper stood. We will get warrants today. Expect arrests soon. Rachel gathered her papers and paused at the door. Evelyn, you are not the victim they expected. A nurse entered shortly after checking my IV line. She whispered softly, almost reverently. They chose the wrong woman to underestimate. I wanted to laugh, but my ribs still burned. So instead, I let the pride rise slowly, like light creeping over the horizon. For the first time since my father died, I felt not broken, but building. They wanted to bury me under fear. Instead, they planted rage and gave it sun. And rage, when fed by truth and love and justice, does not decay. It grows roots. It rises. It becomes something they cannot kill. I laid my head back, eyelids fluttering. When I left this hospital, I would not just walk free. I would walk armed, with evidence, with allies, with the law at my back. Courtrooms do not look like the movies. They are not all thunder and drama and slamming gavels. They are quiet, sterile humming with the soft buzz of fluorescent lights and the weight of judgment sitting like fog in the air. But when I was wheeled into that courtroom for the first hearing, ribs still aching beneath my blouse stitches stiff beneath gauze, I felt the ground beneath me shift. This was not the kitchen floor. This was not the dark. This was not a house I had to flee from. This was where I would stand without running, where truth would sit beside me instead of fear. Rachel walked beside my wheelchair heels, sharp eyes, sharper. She was not just an attorney, she was a blade. Marissa sat behind me, a hand resting lightly on my shoulder, grounding me without a word. The gallery rustled with whispers. Maple Hollow had woken up hungry for scandal. People who once waved from porches now leaned forward on benches, craning necks to see the girl who survived her own family. Some eyes held pity, others curiosity. A few held guilt, neighbors who sensed something long ago but never acted. But none of that mattered. This was not their reckoning. It was mine. When Grant entered with shackles around his wrists and a deputy on either side, a hush rolled across the room. He looked smaller somehow without entitlement as armor. His jaw flexed when he saw me. Rage flickered beneath his skin, but there was fear too thin and sharp like ice cracking. Lydia followed wrists' cuffed hair, not coiffed but flat, makeup smeared like she had applied it with shaking hands. She still tried to sit straight, shoulders back, pearl earrings clinging like ghosts of the woman she pretended to be, but her eyes darted, searching for sympathy and finding none. She saw me and froze. For the first time, I watched her swallow panic instead of confidence. The bailiff called the court to order voice booming against Wood. All rise. Judge Whitaker entered, stern, silver-haired eyes, carrying decades of weighing truth against lies. We sat. Rachel placed her hand lightly on the table. Breathe, she whispered. And I did. For myself. For my father. For every moment I thought silence might protect me. The prosecutor began, voice steady. Your Honor, the state presents evidence of attempted homicide, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, breaking and entering, estate fraud, and conspiracy to commit financial exploitation. Heavy words, words that punctured air and settled like stones. The defense attorney, a slick man in an overpriced suit, stood and attempted a sympathetic tone. Your Honor, this is a family misunderstanding that escalated in grief. A tragic but emotional conflict. No premeditation, no intent to kill, just loss and stress. As if knives were just punctuation in messy conversations. As if stab wounds were emotional metaphors. Rachel rose slowly like a storm-gathering mass. With respect, this is not grief. This is greed made violent. The judge nodded for evidence to begin. They started with the recording. My hand tightened on the arm of my chair as the audio played. There was Grant's voice, low, dangerous. No one will believe you. Not a soul. The courtroom stiffened. Lydia's voice followed. You bring this on yourself. Stop breathing already. Gasps rippled across the benches. One woman covered her mouth. Someone whispered, Jesus Christ. The judge's expression didn't change, but a muscle in his jaw twitched. Then came the sound of the struggle, the impact, my breath breaking the faint scrape of my fingers against wood, my whisper of please, weak, trembling, but alive. My heart hammered, listening to my own pain echo across the room, but I didn't look away. I wanted them to hear what I lived through. I wanted them to know monsters do not always snarl. Sometimes they speak softly, sometimes they share your dinner table. When the clip ended, a silence heavier than gravity fell. The defense attorney cleared his throat, voice quivering. Your Honor, we object to the emotional influence, overruled, the judge said before he finished. The truth is not prejudice. Next came photos, the knife pulled from my kitchen floor, blood-swabbed fingerprints visible, the bruises blooming across my ribs like storm clouds, stitches curving like dark thread across my skin. The emergency surgeon testified with clinical calm. 2 stab wounds, one near the liver, significant blood loss, fractures to the ribs. Survival not guaranteed without timely intervention. Then came Officer Ramirez explaining the forced entry marks on my apartment, lock, the neighbor's 911 call, the blood trail, the knife prints. The financial detective presented bank statements, large withdrawals, shell accounts tied to Lydia's maiden name. Transfers traced to a business that did not exist. Lydia's head lowered with every page. The audience watched her unravel. This was not a grieving widow. This was a thief exposed. Then came the moment Rachel had warned me would hurt testimony. My turn to speak. She stood by my side as I rose slowly. Pain shot down my side, but standing mattered. Victims do not always lie sprawled. Sometimes we rise shaking. Sometimes we speak through broken ribs. I faced the judge, hands trembling only slightly. My voice shook at first, but strength gathers once you begin naming truth. My father always told me to protect the home we built together. He taught me to fix fences and repair floorboards, and he told me the house was part of me. I left for a while after he passed because grief drowned me. But I never let go. I paused, breath shallow. They told me I did not deserve it. They told me I was weak. They tried to take everything he left me. When intimidation did not work, they came to my door. They came into my home. They tried to kill me in the place I trusted most. My voice thickened, but I continued. I am not here because I am bitter. I am here because I am alive, and they believed I wouldn't be. Gasps fluttered again. The judge looked at me with a solemn weight, as if acknowledging not just my survival, but my testimony as a reclaiming of breath itself. When I finished, Rachel touched my arm and whispered, "You did it." The defense approached their moment to try to salvage the wreckage. Grant testified first. He tried to square his shoulders, tried to reclaim arrogance, but his voice shook. "She provoked me," he said. "She always tried to take everything. I lost my temper, but I never intended to hurt her." Rachel rose slowly, eyes narrowed. "You stabbed her twice. Do you believe knives slip in emotional misunderstandings?" Grant stuttered. I panicked. I did not mean—" She cut him cold. "Did you tell her to stop breathing? Did you say no one would believe her?" Silence. "Answer the question." Grant's voice dropped to a mumble. "Yes." The judge's eyes sharpened. Lydia took the stand, next trembling hands clutching tissue. She tried to cry, tried to summon sympathy. "I only wanted to keep the house safe," she whispered, tears forming but not falling. "She is unstable. She threatened us first. She attacked my son." The prosecutor raised a brow. "So, you stabbed her?" Lydia's face contorted. I froze. "I did not." Rachel interjected, voice slicing through the lie. "Did you tell your stepson to finish her?" The courtroom held its breath. Lydia's eyes darted wildly. She searched for escape, but truth had closed every door. "I never—" The judge interrupted. "The recording shows otherwise, Mrs. Hale. That is your voice instructing harm." Lydia looked around like a woman drowning in her own lies. No one moved to save her, not even her attorney. When arguments ended, the courtroom fell still. Judge Whitaker removed his glasses, folded his hands. His voice was measured steel. "The evidence presented is overwhelming. The premeditation, the violence, the financial deception, this court will not ignore such cruelty or calculated greed. Grant Hale, I find you guilty on all charges. Attempted murder, assault with a deadly weapon, conspiracy, and estate fraud. Sentencing recommendation 20 years. Gasps rippled again, some shocked, some relieved. Grant's face went ashen. He looked at me then, and for the first time his eyes showed something other than rage. Defeat. Lydia Hales, the judge, continued. I also find you guilty of conspiracy to commit murder, financial fraud, and coercion. Sentencing recommendation, 15 years. Lydia collapsed into her seat, face pale, lips trembling. She did not look at me. She looked down, finally stripped of every facade. The courtroom buzzed, whispers rising like wind through trees. The judge lifted his gavel. And the property known as the Harper residence shall remain under probate freeze pending transfer to the sole legal heir, Miss Evelyn Harper. The gavel fell, and with that sound, something inside me settled into place. Not victory. Something deeper. A return. A restoration. When deputies moved in, cuffs clicked. The same sound I heard on the night I almost died. Justice echoing back. Grant shouted once, voice cracking, but no one flinched. Lydia whispered something I couldn't hear, but it did not matter. Their voices had already damned them in the recording and in the courtroom. Marissa wrapped her arm around my shoulders, crying softly into my hair. Rachel squeezed my hand. You stood, she whispered. Not everyone can say that. Cameras flashed outside when we exited. Microphones extended. Someone yelled, Evelyn, what do you want to say to them? I paused, breathing air that tasted like freedom and sorrow and steel all at once. I looked forward, not back. I said, "My father raised me to protect what matters." Coming home did not feel like triumph at first. It felt like walking into a memory that was still bleeding the air thick with ghosts, and the echo of who I used to be. The Harper house stood quiet under a pale morning sky when I returned the porch railings slightly weathered the mailbox still bearing my father's last name in faded paint. I stood there for a long moment, just breathing, fingers curled around the keys Rachel handed me after the court order finalized. Not shaking. Not anymore. Just steady. Like the earth had finally stopped tilting beneath my feet. I opened the door slowly, half expecting the house to smell like fear, like bleach, like betrayal. But it didn't. It smelled like dust, like wood warmed by sunlight, like memories settling into place instead of drifting like lost smoke. I stepped inside the floor, creaking the way it always did, not in warning, but in greeting. I closed the door behind me and leaned against it, letting the silence wash over me. This house did not reject me. It had been waiting. For months, it stood hostage to people who had never loved. It never loved him, never loved me. But houses remember. They remember who planted the rose bushes, who sanded the porch rail, who painted the shutters in late spring, while the radio hummed country music through open windows. They remember belonging. I moved slowly through the rooms, touching walls, breathing in every corner. The dining room table sat empty where once threats had been laid like silverware. I ran my fingertips across its surface, remembering the last dinner the paper shoved at me like a knife before the real one arrived. But now the table did not feel like evidence. It felt like endurance. In the living room, a box waited on the floor. Rachel arranged it a small collection of my father's salvaged belongings that Lydia had tried to discard or hide. I knelt beside it, lifting each item carefully. His watch, his old leather gloves, a faded photograph of us standing by the truck sun in our eyes, dust on our shoes. My throat tightened, but the tears did not burn with pain this time. They felt like release, like ground thawing after winter. I placed the photo on the mantel. "This is still your house, Dad," I whispered, "and I am still your girl." The first night I slept there again, I lay awake listening to the soft hum of the air vents, the occasional pop from the settling beams. Not scared, just adjusting to the weight of peace. Healing does not feel like a miracle. It feels like slow breathing. It feels like noticing the quiet, not as emptiness, but as safety. The next morning, I went to the yard with pruning shears. The rose bushes were wild thorns, overgrown petals curled from neglect. I trimmed gently the way he taught me, never cut where the branch still dreams of blooming. Dirt pressed under my nails. Sun warmed the back of my neck. And in a moment so still it made my chest ache, I felt something inside me stitch closed. Not pretend healed, not rushed recovery. True stitching, true return. Neighbors walked by and paused at the fence. They offered casseroles and awkward apologies. Some said they wished they had known. Some said they suspected. Some simply said, "I'm glad you are alive." I nodded to each one. I did not need validation. I did not need their guilt. But I accepted their kindness because healing does not mean isolation. It means choosing who enters your life again. One afternoon, Marissa arrived with paint swatches and iced coffee. She plopped onto the porch swing, swinging lightly. "So," she said, brushing crumbs from her jeans, "when do we repaint the kitchen?" I laughed. It surprised me the way it bubbled up, not brittle, not forced. Real. "Soon," I said. "But first the roses and the fence post on the east side." She groaned dramatically. "Why do all your metaphors involve manual labor?" Because I answered, settling beside her, anything worth keeping takes work. We sat together in comfortable quiet. No threats, no knives, just wind through the trees and the creak of the porch swing. Eventually, she asked, "Are you going back to work soon?" I nodded, not because I had to, but because I wanted routine purpose life beyond trauma. I would fill prescriptions again. I would speak gently to elders again. I would remember that my story was not only blood and courtroom air thick with judgment. It was also medicine community laughter, quiet evenings with tea instead of fear. Before she left, Marissa squeezed my hand. "You didn't survive by luck, Ev. You survived because you never let them steal who you are. After she drove away, I sat alone on the porch steps, watching late afternoon settle into the yard. A robin landed near the roses, hopping across the soil. I remembered my father resting his hand on my shoulder the day we planted them. He whispered, "One day when I'm gone, these will remind you. Love lives longer than people do." I looked at the yard, the house, the porch light I turned on by habit. I whispered back into the quiet, "You were right. I am not unbroken. No one walks away from violence unchanged, but I am whole, whole in a new way. Steadier, sharper, rooted. They tried to kill me for this house. They tried to erase me from my own life. And yet here I stand. Here I breathe. Here I build again. The world does not always reward strength. But sometimes when we refuse to disappear, when we gather truth like stones and courage like fire, the world steps back and gives us room to rise. I brushed dirt from my palms, stood, and walked inside, closing the door gently behind me. Tonight I would sleep in a home reclaimed in a legacy earned not by blood spilled, but by blood survived. I am Evelyn Harper. This is my father's house, and I am here, still standing, still growing, still mine. That is the peace I sit with now in this home, in this life I fought to reclaim. If you are still watching, if you are still here with me, then maybe you know something about that kind of battle. Maybe you know what it is like to love and lose, to trust and be betrayed, to believe in family only to discover that blood can cut as sharply as any blade. But you are still here, too. And that matters. Healing is not loud. It does not rush. It does not demand that the world notice it. It moves like breath, like heartbeat, like a flower that blooms long after winter swore nothing could grow again. I used to think survival meant standing tall, chin lifted, shoulders squared, refusing to crack. Now I know survival also looks like sitting on a porch with tea cooling in your hands, letting sunlight land where bruises used to be, allowing yourself to exhale without waiting for footsteps or raised voices or danger hiding behind a familiar face. I want to say this to you from one survivor of life's storms to another. You do not owe forgiveness to the people who wounded you. You do not owe silence to keep their world comfortable. You do not owe your peace to anyone who tried to take it. You owe yourself softness. You owe yourself rest. You owe yourself the future you dreamed of while you were still trapped in the wreckage of someone else's cruelty. And if no one ever told you this, I am telling you now. You deserved better then. You deserve better now. You are worthy of gentle mornings and quiet evenings and people who protect you instead of pretending to love you while sharpening their teeth behind your back. You are worthy of safety. You are worthy of loyalty. You are worthy of peace that does not have to be earned through suffering. If you have ever walked away from a family who chose harm over love, type "I survived." If someone once tried to break you, but you learned to stand again, tell me I rise. If you are still learning how to breathe without fear, you are not alone. Say, "I am healing." Your words matter. Your story matters. And I will read every single one because this space is not just storytelling. It is a place to breathe, a place to remember that justice can happen, a place to believe that strength is not the absence of hurt, but the courage to rebuild anyway. If my father could see me now sitting in the sunlight of the home he left me, he would not see scars. He would see resilience. He would see a woman who refused to let darkness claim what love built. And I hope you see that in yourself, too. No matter what they took, no matter how hard they tried to bury your voice, you are still here, still breathing, still rising. If you are watching from somewhere quiet tonight, tell me where you are watching from. Drop a little heart so I know you are here with me. And if you have a story you are not ready to tell out loud, that is okay. Sometimes healing begins in silence. Sometimes strength arrives before words do. When you are ready, I will be here. We all will. Because here, we do not break alone and we do not heal alone. And tomorrow, when the sun touches your window, I hope it reminds you the way it reminds me, the worst part is behind you. The future is yours now, and no one will ever take it from you again.